Welcome to Critical Junction episode 41. I'm Mark.
I'm Luke.
I'm Jill.
And yesterday, in an election result that surprised no one, residents of Ontario gave former Toronto City Councillor and blundering populist Doug Ford a strong mandate and a majority government, reducing the Liberal Party, who had governed for 15 years, to a distant third place. Andrea Horwath, leader of the Ontario New Democrats, will now serve as leader of the official opposition after a roller coaster campaign. A virtually meaningless position within a majority government, though progressives across the province will be counting on her to hold the new government to task. In the aftermath of this dumpster fire of an election, one can't help but think back to 2015 when federal Liberal leader Justin Trudeau promised electoral reform as part of his campaign. After the election of Donald Trump in 2016, though, Prime Minister Trudeau reneged on that promise, alienating a large swath of his base who had voted Liberal based on the hope that the way in which we elect our representatives would change. But it hasn't, and our particular form of democracy facilitated the election of a man who, for all intents and purposes, can be referred to as Trump Light to head Canada's most populous province. Along with the prevailing anti-Kathleen Wynne sentiment that dominated this campaign was a palpable desire for real change. But will Ford be the change the residents of Ontario so strongly desire? Time will tell, but if his lack of vision and propensity to rely on rhetoric over reason is any indication, odds are the answer will be no. So, what can be done to stem the rise of populism? Can Canada adopt an electoral system that's more balanced than our current first-past-the-post framework? Or will we continue to do nothing and see more inept, trust fund millionaires like Ford come to power? Let's talk about that, shall we?
Well, BC is just about to hold a referendum about an alternative electoral system. It looks like they're considering some forms of mixed member proportional. They've got something called the mixed member proportional and another idea that was called the dual member proportional, I think. And then there's one that's rural-urban proportional.
Are these all part of the same thing that they're proposing, or are they like
these are different alternatives?
Okay.
Yeah, and their referendum that they're going to be embarking on is going to be like a two-step referendum. One first off, where they're asking whether people want to keep FP first past the post, or go to an alternative voting system, and then the second stage will be to choose which alternative voting system. So they're considering the I think the main thing that they're looking at is mixed member proportional, though, to replace the first past the post.
Yeah, there's a lot of discontent with the first past the post system, particularly among those people who were pissed off at Justin Trudeau for reneging on the electoral reform promise.
Wait, it worked for me. Let's not change it.
Well, okay.
Yeah, so that's like a criticism that, or at least part of the rhetoric that's being launched at anybody who talks about electoral reform in the wake of an election that went some way other than they would have wanted, right? So the immediate criticism is that, oh, you're only asking for electoral reform because you didn't like the result. But I mean, everybody who voted for the Liberal Party based on their promise to bring in electoral reform, they've been quite vocal about their disappointment and anger with Justin Trudeau's reneging on that promise. And they're still asking for electoral reform.
Yeah, and just recently he said he was open to certain elements of reform, most notably in Bill C-76, I think it is, that aims to introduce a couple of more safeguards into the Elections Canada Act and whatnot. Things like, spending limits and that kind of thing for political parties, and limiting the amount of time that a political campaign can last. I think it's to 50 days is what this bill is proposing. It's all little things like that, but it's fundamentally just
not addressing the problem that people have with FPTP.
Exactly. It's not introducing a new kind of electoral system into our thinking. It's really just kind of a patchwork system to fix the existing framework.
So have we spelt out what the problem with FPTP is, or first past the post?
Let's.
Take her away.
Take her away! Or bake her away, toys. So with this past election that happened yesterday, what ended up happening is 40%. A party that got 40% of the vote now has 100% of the power in the legislature because they have a supermajority. So I mean that's fundamentally unfair, I think, but it's also just plainly not in the spirit of democracy, which is normally talking about the majority being the ones that select the government, right? We've got way less than a majority here that now have all of the power, and the actual majority of the populace has zero say in the legislation of the government. That's I mean, on its face, it's a perversion of democracy.
And that's why a lot of people are frustrated and tired of the existing system. It's because they feel disenfranchised, and that causes a rise in populism. It's the angry, particularly angry conservatives who tend to go out and vote in numbers because they're that motivated. You know, if we take the example of Ontario, the Liberals having been in power for 15 years, you know, the Conservatives are rightfully, I guess, according to them, angry, and they want to do something about it. So it doesn't matter what the PC's message is. You know, it's just they're not Kathleen Wynne, and that's what a lot of the motivation was to vote PC, because people were not ready to trust the New Democrats and put them into power.
Yeah, it's unfortunate though that voting PC isn't really a change. It's just keeping the same shit going.
Well, we don't know what they're going to do. Like Ford, as far as we know, you know, he didn't release a fully costed platform until a couple of days ago.
Because I guess you don't have to anymore. Like,
well, that's the thing.
You can just go up there and really just bullshit.
A lot of the analysts were saying that he's different from all the other candidates for premier that we've had in the past decade and a half.
So we should have had like Grimace from McDonald's running it with his own party. It would have been
personally, I think anybody,
as long as he had the PC logo pinned to his chest, 40% of the electorate would have voted for that.
Yeah, I think anybody would have had the same result.
Yeah,
right. The sentiment.
I mean, obviously,
yeah,
because Ford doesn't represent any type of actual qualification or merit for that office.
Right.
He was elected purely on the banner under which he was running, plus on the hatred of who had controlled the legislature for 15 months.
And the distrust of the NDP.
That's right. Yeah, and that rhetoric about identity politics and the NDP being ultra radicals, even though like 3/4 of the Liberal platform was taken straight from NDP policy.
Right. Typically, the Liberal Party is more geared towards evidence-based policymaking. It's enshrined in their constitution, but you know, I think a lot of people seem to embrace the idea that the NDP and the Conservatives are two sides of the same coin. They're both ideologically driven. To a certain extent, the NDP is ideologically driven. No argument that the PCs are. Either PCs here or the Conservatives federally, right? They are ideologically driven. The NDP, on the other hand, you know, their ideology is a lot more progressive and, in my opinion, acceptable than conservative ideology. Like they want actual change, they want social justice, they want all these types of really happy things that a lot of progressives embrace. But some of the softer liberals aren't willing to vote NDP because of their idea that it's ideologically driven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really frustrating. I mean, I don't. My riding, the vote was. I mean, it's a perfect case in point for a split vote, right? We had a clear indication that the Liberals were going to be in third place in this election in that riding, but the Liberal Party had actually held the seat in that riding for the entire 15 years that provincially the Liberals were in office, like a full like 29% of the electorate there, which is still third place because the NDP and the PC were neck and neck in there at 32%, 32 to 33%, and the Liberals had fallen way behind and just stayed in third place for the last part of the campaign, and yet this chunk, like nearly a third of the electorate, was just incapable of reading the writing that's on the wall and just saying, fuck it, I'd rather keep 75% of the policy that I support in the party that I swear allegiance to. Like, fuck the actual substance of the policy. I'd rather go down in flames with a government who's actually hostile to my style of politics, and let the Conservatives take it than actually, take a hit for the team and vote for the other party that represents my politics better.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I've been saying since before the election. One is that when it comes to things like politics, people do not, for the most part, engage in critical thinking or any kind of rational analysis of what the platform is. They vote either because, in some situations, because that's the way they've always voted. Like, for example, if you're an NDP supporter or a Liberal supporter, you'll always vote like that. Like, I have some family members who are dedicated Liberals, and they always vote Liberal no matter what. Because they've been brought up liberal, their family's been liberal for generations, and it's like in the U.S. If you're a Democrat, you vote Democrat. If you're a Republican, you vote Republican. And I think that's an argument against the idea of a two-party system, which a lot of people have been arguing in favor for. I've heard this conversation in a couple of different places. Like some people want us to move to a two-party system, which is, in my opinion, detrimental to democracy. It's not conducive to having a fair conversation or a representative assembly of people who are standing up for their constituents. If you have a two-party system, you're polarizing both sides. It's either one or the other, and there's no in between. Having more parties available to choose from facilitates a greater dialogue, and it allows for more ideas to come to the table, and allows also for all these parties to work together in theory. Right? So a two-party system
in theory,
yeah. A two-party system, I don't think,
So
that's not the way to go.
The problem is the first past the post system. I think it's an inevitability that it leads to a two-party system. Because otherwise what ends up happening is you get this kind of vote splitting with these perverse results where 60% of the electorate gets a party they voted against,
right,
that has 100% of the power. That kind of perversion can only be prevented if people actually decide to ally on one side or the other against that one other half, right? So eventually, if Canada's population is capable of smartening up, they might eventually just naturally have most of the people that are interested in politics and joining parties and presenting themselves as candidates and stuff like that. They're going to start gravitating towards one or the other of either the Liberals or the NDP,
right?
Because they're going to smarten up and they're going to say, look, we only get in government when we actually rally around one or the other of either of these two parties against the right-leaning party.
See, that's why I think systems like the one they have in Germany are preferable to what we have here. Like in Germany, you vote for the person or candidate that you want to represent you in your riding. And then on the same ballot, you vote for the party that you want to represent you federally, right? So in order for a party to be represented in the Bundestag, they have to have a certain percentage of that vote that's coming in from that same ballot. That prevents other populist parties from rising to power, or from any party. It prevents all parties from achieving an absolute majority, and it forces them to work together in the Bundestag. That's been true for the past 60 years. Like Chancellor Merkel has held, up until recently, a pretty solid coalition government together. The German democracy is in Europe at least, looked upon as one of the best examples of a parliamentary system just because of that amount of representation. It's really complicated for people who are not familiar with it and aren't used to dealing with that kind of system, but I think it makes a lot more sense, right? You have your local representative in your riding, and then you have the party federally that you want to vote for, right? So sometimes it results in more than the 598 seats in the Bundestag, which is why they have all these spillover seats. If there are more people elected than there are in the usual parliament, then they have all these background seats that they assign people to.
So one thing I hear people kind of worried about with those kinds of proportional systems is that more radical kind of parties, like the explicitly kind of white nationalist parties that you see, for example, in Austria, I guess.
Well, Germany's never had any problem with that, though, right? Thank you very much. Thank you.
So is there anything? So is that a vulnerability in the mixed member proportional?
I don't.
Where just because they get 10% of the vote, they have to get 10% of the seats? Is that the way it works?
No, they don't let you. In order for them to be considered to be represented in Parliament, the party I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That party needs to achieve a certain percentage of the popular vote. Right?
Okay.
If they don't reach that margin, they're not considered at all for the Bundestag.
Mm-hmm,
right.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, with the Alternative für Deutschland that just came to power recently in the last election. They're a right-wing populist party, and they never, up until now, reached that threshold. But due to anti-Chancellor Merkel sentiment and anti-immigrant sentiment, they rose and met the threshold. So for the first time ever, they're represented in the Bundestag, which some people find really disturbing. Other people are applauding because, again, Merkel, for all the good she's done, has stumbled in a lot of the same ways that Wynne did, and she's starting to feel the effect of that. Right? People are pissed off at her. The same kind of anti-Kathleen Wynne sentiment that we're seeing here is being seen in Germany. So I don't know if it's really a danger to the system.
No, because still they're going to have a very tiny ineffectual majority of the seats, even though they do get a seat at the table.
Yeah, their
Bundestag,
right? Representation is minuscule compared to the coalition that Merkel has now. Granted, it took her a long time after the election to form that coalition, but now that it's secured and she's chancellor again, I think she can get some real work done. The Alternative für Deutschland is going to be there kind of pushing her buttons all the time.
Yeah.
Whether or not they gain more popularity, that remains to be seen.
See, I think that's why I've been more attracted to the other alternative voting system, the single transferable vote, the STV system. This is the one where it's basically an instant runoff type of system where what you do is when you get a ballot of members, you rank the people on the ballot.
I see.
Is that the system they have in France?
I'm not sure if they do STV in France. I didn't actually look up which countries have it. I think Australia does it.
Okay, because I know there are 2 rounds of elections in France, right?
No, yeah. So STV doesn't take 2 rounds of election. What you do is you rank you rank the candidates on the ballot. If there are candidates that you have no interest that you really don't want in, you just leave them blank. But otherwise, you basically say, okay, this is my first choice, and if he doesn't get it, then my second choice would be this, and my third choice would be this. Huh. And then what happens is that when they're tallying the votes, basically you have to meet a minimum threshold to get the seat. So if you get something like at least 30% or something, then you're gonna automatically get a seat. But if you get a very small percent, if the one who's got the least number of votes, he's automatically eliminated. Okay. And all of the people who voted for that guy, or all of the votes that went to that guy, those votes are checked for what the number 2 was. And those votes would just kind of fold over and jump on to whoever was their second choice, right? So in a case where you get Green Party, NDP, Liberal, and Conservative, let's say Green Party gets only 5% of the vote, then everybody who voted for the Green Party, that party gets automatically eliminated because it didn't hit the threshold and the minimum. The party that got the least votes, they're just automatically eliminated. Right. Their votes will jump over or will be given to whoever was marked as second place on those ballots.
On those ballots. Okay. Yes,
right. So if you chose the Liberals as your second choice on that, all of those votes would jump onto the Liberals total, and that would kind of boost up the Liberal total.
There'd certainly be a lot more investigating to do into all these other parties.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we get to our ballot and we go like, wow, what are these other parties?
Right.
Like, I have no idea what their real agendas are, other than the self-explanatory by the title that they've given themselves, sort of thing, you know.
Like, I mean, it doesn't necessitate more research, but I guess it encourages it.
But that's what I'm suggesting. If you want to actually create an order for all of them, you want to make sure
it encourages more engagement.
Right.
I think.
Now, like with the example of the French system, it's like I said, it's a 2-round voting thing. So you have all your candidates for president, and then you cast your choices. The top 2 after the first round move on to the second round. So now you have these 2 top candidates competing head to head against each other. You know, it just happened recently with Macron and Le Pen, right? Le Pen, another right-wing populist. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
But do we think any of these systems that we've just talked about might actually work in Canada? The cat says no.
It's funny.
I think the cat might have been saying yes.
She might have been saying yes. I can't speak cat.
Why wouldn't they work in Canada?
Well, I think people are not ready to adopt that kind of change.
Yeah, I never buy that kind of argument.
Yeah,
it's like during our gun control episode when our guest brought up the idea of Japan being fundamentally different. So the fact that gun control works there doesn't actually mean anything.
Right.
Like, that's weak, if you ask me.
Yeah.
People are people.
Right.
And when you see evidence of a system being applied to people and it working, that means something.
Yeah.
It doesn't not become evidence just because it's a different location.
I think any of these systems would work just as well here as they do in Europe or elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Like, in particular, I'm just a huge fan of the German system. I'm a fan of Germany in general, but like the German electoral system to me makes a lot of sense because you have that dual representation, right? It's more democratic. It gives more opportunity for the parties to work together, like I said before. And it may take some time to get things started, but things get done.
Well, this would be nice, parties working together a little more. You know, like I find every time I'm checking out what's going on in the government, like it's just a bunch of bickering kids.
That's another problem.
It doesn't really seem to be doing much, man. During
the election, when the NDP was starting to surge ahead of the Liberals, which came a couple of days after the writ dropped, but it was said right away by Kathleen Wynne that she had no desire to form any kind of coalition or work together with the NDP, regardless of whether or not they form power. Yeah. The Liberals traditionally have not been huge fans of sharing power, either federally or provincially. Mm-hmm. Why the hell not? The real enemy should be the Conservatives because they're in complete opposition to everything these two parties stand for.
And I think the Democrats down south have the same problem. It's like this idea that they need to be really strategic, and it just makes them too clever by half.
Right.
Where they're like, okay, we have to say we're not willing to work with them. So that the votes work out this way. Or, for example, I kind of think that maybe Kathleen Wynne's whole strategy with her conceding the election the weekend before, last weekend, She basically said, I know we have no chance of winning. But then she goes on to say, so vote for the Liberal candidates to prevent either an NDP majority or a PC or a
Doug Ford majority.
Or a Doug Ford majority.
I find it interesting that she used his name specifically in that context.
Well, not just that she used his name specifically. She also only used the NDP party name specifically,
right,
and exclusively. And she pretended like as if there was an equal chance of the NDP getting a majority.
Yeah,
so there's like layer upon layer of dishonesty in there, right? First of all, why is she absolutely refusing to name the PC party, the PCP, right? That's what's gonna persist. The guy that's at the head that they have numbers saying that a lot more people hate him than that hate his party. He's irrelevant kind of because he's probably going to get voted out after the next election. But the PC party is going to continue.
Right.
It's going to persist, right?
I think she was definitely banking on, I guess, the flip side of her own lack of popularity by naming Doug Ford specifically in that context. I think she was anticipating that people just did not like him.
Yeah,
which is why she named him, right?
So there's a couple of things there though. On one level, I think they were thinking, yeah, they've got numbers saying that more people dislike Ford than that dislike the PC party. But also, I think she thinks that it's better for the Liberal Party if conservative government goes in there, does all the kind of fuck up shit like that the PC party did during Mike Harris's years, where like, you know, people were fucking murdered by that party because of their negligence with the deregulation and shit with Walkerton. And she knows that there's going to be just a pendulum swing back to the left side, and they're probably going to pick the Liberals again. Whereas if the NDP take it, then the pendulum swing is going to swing away from the left and go all the way to the PC party, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's that kind of calculation that goes on, and it's not a...
Well, let's talk about Liberal strategy in general and Kathleen Wynne's strategy in particular. Personally, I don't think it was a wise idea for her to go into this election in the first place. Like, she had access to all the polls and all the information saying that she was just not a popular leader.
I mean, they should just... but there doesn't seem to be any leaders. Well, there are no leaders.
That we know of. But,
right.
Like, she knew full well going into the election that
Doug Ford wasn't a leader until, like, a friggin' month and a half ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in that sense, he was a face to put leader on, is all that was, right? And we recognized his face and his name, and pow, he blew up.
But
he trumpeted.
Okay, but if Kathleen Wynne had wanted the party to win, and was not driven by, you know, thick-headed ego-ness, she would have stepped aside, and the party would have elected somebody who would be better suited to become premier in her stead.
And in that, you're assuming that there is someone that could.
I'm not assuming anything. I'm just saying that it was a bad idea for her to go into the election because she was so unpopular.
It's not just her decision.
It's
a collective decision.
Since when does an incumbent just step aside to begin with when they actually have a record for their legislature to defend, right?
The record was irrelevant in this case. It was the unpopularity of their leader that caused them to fail so badly at the polls. People hated Kathleen Wynne going into the election. She knew this. She knew it. She came up with a message later on in the campaign
my
with
point,
a sorry not sorry thing. Like, I'm sorry people don't like me more. You knew that. Kathleen Wynne, you knew that. You knew people didn't like you, and you still tanked the party. She destroyed the Liberals. They've lost official party status.
Yeah, I think it's the worst since 1951.
So what does losing official party status mean?
It means they are not recognized in the legislature. They can't ask questions unless they're authorized to do so. They can't present any private members' bills. They don't have access to funding for research or staffing anymore.
They can't poop in the nice bathroom anymore.
They're a third party, and they have lost all rights in the legislature unless they're recognized by the speaker.
Right, but what is the substantive difference between that and the official opposition in a supermajority government?
Money. They lost research funding. They lost funding for a bunch of other shit.
Right, so they're going to have to go directly to the people.
They're going to have to go to the people
and do
ask for,
fundraising,
like donations. Yeah,
way.
exactly.
Wow.
And they have 7 seats in the legislature.
Which most other parties, which other parties do all the time.
Right, but coming out of an election,
and them being the biggest party means that it's not actually that much skin off their nose if they have to do fundraising directly.
Yeah.
Because it's not like they don't have a support base that's there. They're going to be right back presenting a candidate at the very next election in 4 years' time.
It's going to be tough.
It's not as big a deal.
It is though, because they're coming out of a very expensive election campaign. They spent so much on this. Now that they've lost party status, a lot of that funding that they would have otherwise received is gone. They're going to have to lay off a bunch of people who work there. They're going to have to readjust their strategy. They're going to have to come up with a bunch of new ways to raise funds and rebuild the party.
But the Liberal Party is a corporation, man. It's not eliminated. They've still got a network.
Of course they do.
A fundraising network.
I'm not saying it's going to be impossible.
Policy network.
I'm not saying it's impossible, but they have a long, hard road ahead of them.
Yeah, I don't buy it. Especially not when it's just provincially. Like they're going to get help from the federal Liberals, and it's
not so much. They're 2 distinct entities.
Technically they are.
Technically they are, but they still have policy.
Come on,
they're not going to get as much as you think. Like they're a lame duck party at this point, and they have a lot of work to do. Like they have to they have to rebuild not only their funding, they also have to rebuild their base, and they have to rebuild trust in their image.
They still got their base. That's the thing.
If they had their base, they would be in government right now, or at the very least, they would be in opposition.
No. What I mean is that we've got this kind of polarized pendulum swinging kind of dynamic going on right now.
Well, it's swinging hard now.
Sure, it's swinging hard.
Well, I would assume it swings hard.
Like I said, after the PC's run, they're gonna do a bunch of shit that's really dumb, just like they always do whenever they're in government. And they're gonna piss off a lot of people, and that pendulum is just gonna swing right back in the other direction.
Yeah.
And everybody's just gonna vote for the Liberal Party candidate that presents himself, even if they did it with not much money.
Yeah.
That's banking on more anti-NDP or lack of trust in the NDP, right? But we'll see how they perform as opposition. But again, they have 40 seats as opposed to the PC's 73 now, I think it is.
I thought it was 71, was it not?
70-something. Like, what can they do? Like you said, they have a supermajority in the legislature.
Yeah, exactly.
The other parties are powerless to do anything. They can pass whatever laws they want.
But that's the thing. The Liberal brand doesn't stop being a thing just because they lost official party status.
Right, Nike is still Nike.
As a technicality,
We've worn Nike shoes before.
The Liberal Party is still the big boss in the federal legislature, so they're still top of mind for everybody in the country. So that's why I say there's a couple of different things there. So for one thing, it's not as impossible for them to just bounce right back at the next election provincially, and it's also not as much of a victory or of a victory for the PC party as they wish. Like when the Conservatives, when the federal PC party got decimated in the late 80s after Mulroney, and they were reduced to 2 seats, even less than what the Liberals have here provincially. They just had like their little recovery period where they flirted with a secondary right-wing party, the Reform Party or whatever, and then they just got their shit together. Knew that they didn't want to do the vote splitting that the left does perpetually because they're fucking hard-headed. And they just amalgamated and said, okay, let's make our crap party, and then they realized that acronym was fucking dumb, and they changed that.
The
But
Conservative Reform Alliance Party.
but then they just bounced right back, and they managed to get the government for like 2-3 terms, was it, that we had Harper in?
So do you think, how difficult or not difficult do you think their bounce back, the Liberals, will be this time in Ontario?
I don't think that's my point. I don't think it's going to be difficult at all. I think there's a lot of uncertainty and scariness about like just the notion of losing official party status, but it doesn't mean they've actually been destroyed and erased from the political landscape.
No,
they have not been erased.
They haven't been erased.
That's what people want you to think, though. They want you to think that when you say they lost official party status, that the Liberal Party has been erased from the political landscape, and that is 100% false.
Yeah, that's not at all what I'm saying. Like, what I'm saying is they have 7 seats. It's a tiny, tiny fraction of the rest of the legislature, and they have a long road ahead of them. It's gonna be bumpy. There's a lack of trust in the Liberal brand right now. They have their
lack of trust all around.
But they have their dedicated base. I'm not going to argue against that.
But they don't have a healthcare system disaster or a Walkerton like the PCs did.
Right.
So they're not going to be in the political wilderness for 15 years.
And now PC's about to get blamed for everything, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because they have too much power now, right? So they're going to take the brunt of everything.
Let's talk about that for a second. The idea of a supermajority in either the House of Commons or in the legislature or whatever you want to talk about. Right, like that again sounds like an affront to democracy. Having one party in power who can pass anything despite the will of the opposition.
Yeah.
Right, and that's again another idea or another reason why we should be aiming to reform our system here.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like they can pass anything they want. Doesn't matter what the other parties say. We have a hell of a lot more seats than you do. We can do anything. That's true federally for the Liberals. It's true now provincially for the Conservatives. It was true for the Liberals here in Ontario as well for the past few years, right? So what can be done to prevent that kind of abuse of power?
The only thing that can be done is to get your shit together on strategic voting and move yourself to a 2-party system. Where you eliminate one of the other parties that's splitting the vote on the left and getting your ideological opposite elected every time because they're consolidated. So either you do that or you enact electoral reform.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 options.
I'm more in favor of reform because I don't like the idea of a 2-party system. Because
the 2-party system, of course, it's not the ideal, and it would inevitably also be temporary. Eventually, people are going to sort of rise up again and then demand the electoral reform just at a later time.
Right.
And I think that's going to happen in the States not too long from now too with.
Yeah, I don't. Let's not.
I'm not saying that electoral reform is going to happen in the near future in the States, but we're already seeing some movement on gerrymandering in the States, which is really skewing that kind of democratic process.
Right. And we saw a hint of that here, before this recent federal election, like the redrawing of the electoral district maps and stuff. That the Conservatives thought they were doing a good thing to get their party reelected by switching the boundaries of where their support was.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that the Liberals won the last election. I thought there was a good chance that redrawing of the electoral map by the Conservatives.
I never thought that would work. No, because there was enough anti-Harper sentiment at that point that any effort on the part of the Conservatives would just be futile, right? Trudeau has always been a populist in his own right. People, for whatever reason, because maybe he's really attractive to the millennial generation with his selfie thing.
Should have just stopped with attractive.
60% of the electorate hated Ford and didn't particularly like the PCs, and weren't particularly impressed with the leadership race that the PCs did, nor the weird political assassination that happened at the 11th hour just before an impending election of their former leader.
Let's talk about that briefly.
So 60% of the electorate had no interest in the PCs and were animated against them, and yet 60% still means zero power in the legislature.
Right. That's gotta piss you off, if anything, if nothing else. It's like, just tangentially, I just saw this earlier this afternoon, but turns out that voter turnout during this election is 58%, the highest since 1999.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it kind of sad that 58% of the electorate is the highest we've seen?
Yeah, that's I love everybody like going, wow, 58%. Woo!
So is that the kids not coming out kind of thing? Is that what that is?
That's a big part of it. Like I kept seeing stuff online about like, oh, it's decline the vote and. Or what does it matter?
Spoil the ballot or decline the vote. It's a legitimate form of protest. Fuck the system. No, you're not fucking the system. You're fucking yourself.
Yeah.
Like, regardless of whether or not that's considered to be a quote-unquote legitimate form of protest, it solves nothing, right? The people in power will continue to be in power. The people running for office will continue to run for office, and they'll continue getting elected because you're not fucking voting.
I'm going to say
fucking vote.
That's just justifying laziness with
Pretty much.
with a thought.
It's justifying laziness. It's justifying apathy.
Yeah. Well, I'm equating apathy with laziness.
Sure. Okay.
You're just not taking things into consideration.
Yeah.
You're just getting drunk.
The way to change the system is to get involved in the system. You vote, you join a party, you work within it to make changes. That's how democracy works.
And it's a really slow process.
I think the liberals are going to have to either try and do some kind of takeover or at least merge with the NDPs, the NDP supporters are going to have to do that with the Liberal Party.
The two parties will never merge.
What I'm saying is that the people, the individuals that support either party, they're at some point they gotta wake up and realize that their vote is being split and their ideological opposite is constantly getting all of the power.
Why do people not realize that? To me, that's astonishing.
Realize what? The splitting?
The whole vote splitting.
Yeah.
And I find it amazing actually that that strategic voting hasn't become easier to do in the social media age.
Yeah, considering the amount of information we have access to. Like, I posted something that broke down the support and the likelihood of the candidates winning riding by riding.
Yeah.
And I posted on Facebook saying, like, if there's still time to vote, if you're going to do it, you want to vote strategically, this will really help you because these are the numbers. This is the likelihood of each candidate winning in each of the ridings and their second and third place challengers, right? Mm-hmm. And the percentage of likelihood that they would win associated to each and every one of them. That's the type of information we currently have access to.
Yeah.
It's the type of information that's easily shareable and easily digestible because it's just percentages, right? Likelihoods, probability. It's all put together for you. Why are people not sharing this more than they are? Like, I know there are a lot of people
even in the sharing, though,
it's not politically
engaged. Right.
A lot of people are politically engaged these days. But we need to see more of that to make a real difference.
I don't think people are really digesting it. People aren't really doing anything with it. They're looking at it and going, okay, but I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm going liberal, yeah.
That's it exactly. The like what you were saying earlier about like lifelong supporters of one party or another.
Right.
It's about something more kind of
it's identity politics in a way.
Yeah, more fundamental to your identity. You're just like, I'm one of these people. That's my tribe.
I'm a liberal or I'm a conservative
right.
or whatever.
And so unless you devise a political marketing strategy that speaks to that part of the electorate's nature, you're not going to get anywhere. You know. So as much as hand-wringers on the internet talk about how identity politics are what elected Trump or what elected Ford, what turned people away from the NDP, that shit is actually what's what's going to get people to galvanize around the NDP as the party that opposes the party of the right.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a question of putting out the right advertising campaign, the right marketing campaign.
By the time we all swing NDP, we're going to be going, well, fuck, it's too late, man. We got to go green now. Like, the whole world's fucked, you know?
Well, on the plus side, Mike Schreiner, leader of the Ontario Green Party, finally got elected.
Yeah.
Good for him. Good for the
Good for
Green Party.
Guelph.
Good for Guelph.
Yeah.
Yeah, like...
They got their shit together.
Yeah.
They did that.
Yeah.
To that guy.
They did that to him.
So, yeah, I mean, it was a... Like I said during the intro, it was a dumpster fire of a campaign.
So yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so like, people are congratulating that Green Party MPP now.
And his one seat.
Right? But it's like I don't know, it's like a meaningful event now that for the first time ever the Green Party gets a seat, and that's a thing, and that's going to mean something also for the next election, right? Because he's gonna be there. He's gonna maybe talk in the legislature. He's gonna be talking on the news as one of the parties that's represented in the legislature. He's gonna
yeah, but like, we got to remember, he doesn't have official party status either.
This was the point I was trying to get to, is that it's a big thing that he gets a seat, but he doesn't have official party status. But it's gonna but everybody seems to concede that this is like some positive big step that has implications for future success.
So you're saying it really
of
is
the party.
really symbolic.
So how can you turn around and say the opposite for the Liberal, saying that just because they have less than 8 seats, it means that now they're a nothing party and they're completely inconsequential, and it eliminates the possibility of success.
It's not that the Liberals are now inconsequential. It's just that they went from being a majority government who'd been in charge of the province for 15 years to now third place, losing the official party status.
Yeah, but
it's just a monument. It's the contrast. It's a monumental shift for the party.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that kind of rational analysis is actually happening in most people's minds.
Of course it isn't.
Right. You're saying it's not a monumental shift. It just looks like one. Is what
in this very short-term moment. Yeah. I think otherwise everybody still has their like internal identity narrative that they're doing.
I feel like
you're
the cop going, keep nothing to see here, keep
moving.
Nothing
to see here,
keep moving, people.
It's just
not as bad as you think. Keep
it's
on
just
moving.
7
That's not what
seats,
I'm doing.
people. It's just 7 seats. Keep moving.
No. I'm being sincere here, and I'm saying that I think because of the polarization, right, that we're seeing, these kinds of swings are just going to get more and more. You know, it's like that bridge that reacts to the cable bridge that reacts to the wind, and it hits like some kind of frequency where it starts kind of waving and oscillating and pulls itself apart or whatever. That's what'll happen politically with this kind of hyperpolarization and just slow move towards a two-party system, that after it becomes a two-party system, then polarization even increases, like you see in the States.
And then it leads to the platonic tyranny in the end, kind of thing.
And then it just becomes like this kind of pendulum swing game, right? Where you'll have the hardcore identitarians on each side that always vote the same way, and then you'll have like some proportion of the electorate that's kind of in the middle, that's sometimes willing to play one side or the other, and they basically decide how the pendulum swings, and it just becomes a pendulum swing like that.
Yeah.
And it becomes boring.
Yep.
So let's take the last 10 minutes of the episode to delve a little bit into the realm of speculation here, which I ordinarily don't like to do, us being a show about facts. But how do you think Ford will do as premier during the next 4 years? And what do you think the reaction will be from both the NDP and the Liberals?
I have, I don't know. How do you think he's going to perform? I don't know. Can he perform?
I think, the PC party is a big corporation, right? And it's basically going to be calling most of the shots. It's not like Doug Ford is some kind of visionary or something that the PC party
Right, he's not
is
an actual leader.
behind.
He's just a face of
Kinda.
the party.
Yeah, so
Are
I
you
think they're
asking,
going
will
to
we
do
get our
they're
buck of
going to
beer?
do exactly what we've seen the PC party do in Ontario for decades. You know, or whenever they've been in power, and it's not been great.
It's never been great. Whenever the Conservatives are in power, it's never great.
We're going to see another Walkerton within this next term.
I think you're probably right. Like, I think...
Like, you're talking, like, what does that mean? Like, a dangerous scenario where people die?
Like, going into the election, like, there were so many candidates on the PC side who were facing numerous scandals or legal investigations or all kinds of weird shit just right from the get-go. You know, and I think a lot of that is going to come to light over the next 4 years. Like, a lot of these newly elected MPPs are going to have to face up to the fact that they're being investigated for whatever, you know.
Right.
You know, like...
Yeah, it seems like there's an awful lot of investigations.
Yeah,
going
like,
on
that
a lot.
shit doesn't just go away because you got elected to high office, right? Like, they're going to have to face this at some point, right? And I think out of that, we're probably going to see some type of really, really big scandal that's going to cast a shadow over the PCs.
I mean, we can only hope so, but I find...
Scandals mean less and less.
Yeah, and we the Canadians are a bit wimpy with our scandals. We kind of don't... We lose interest pretty quickly, and...
Kind of wimpy with our scandals.
Well, it's true, though. We don't do much with our scandals.
No, I think
I think
you're right.
We're a little respectful in a way, in a sense.
I think you're
kinda,
right.
sorta.
Scandals are losing like the punch that they used to have. Like, if you look back at Bill Clinton and the whole scandalous shit that happened there.
That kind of stuff does not happen in Canada.
Well, regardless of whether or not it happens in Canada, if it were to happen today,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have the same impact as it did during the Bill Clinton era, because people are just kind of... It's been normalized. Politicians are going to fuck up and do something stupid, and she sucked his dick in the Oval Office. Big whoop, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the guy that the Republicans in the States elected to be the leader of the Republicans and who was elected president, he said he's recorded admitting to sexual assault. He said that he could literally shoot someone in
Times
the face
Square.
Standing on Fifth Avenue or something.
Fifth Avenue, yeah, whatever. And nothing, he wouldn't lose any votes.
And he wouldn't lose a single vote. And you know, that in itself would have been a sufficient scandal 20 years ago, and it just isn't now.
So we've been desensitized.
I think we've been completely desensitized with and I don't think it's just Donnie that desensitized.
No, a lot of it is the media.
I don't even think it's the media generally. I think it's the internet. I think the internet desensitizes you to pretty much anything because...
Well, hold on.
It's the media and the internet.
Like, the general oversaturation of everything? I mean, we just don't know anymore. We can't believe things anymore.
It's not that we can't believe things. I think it's just like yours with the example of the internet. We're just inundated with this particular type of information when it comes to things like scandals or whatever. It just blows up. It circulates over social media. People get inundated with all of this, you know, scandalous bullshit stuff, and they become desensitized to it.
But it's not even the scandals. It's just
referring specifically to scandals. Like, it's not necessarily
example,
just
right.
that. It's just, you know, as that one example.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that, like, on the internet, you can see anything you could ever imagine.
Right.
You know, like I remember the day when I saw somebody get beheaded on the internet. You know, and
it's the sounds. It's the sounds of
before the internet existed. Like the idea.
No, it's true. We had to do our own beheadings to hear those gurgling sounds.
Well, the idea is before the internet came along, you could imagine that you might never see something that horrific, right? And now it's something that almost everybody has seen, or
Yeah.
everybody of a particular generation.
Like before the internet, you had to rent that
Have
Faces
seen
of
some
Death
horrific-
cassette, right? Like you had to
Yeah,
go-
exactly.
right?
Some
You
kind of
see
and-
someone getting hit by a Mack truck or whatever,
And just the fact that it was that hard
documentary.
to see it, and when you would watch it, it would be something that you would kind of be doing with a bunch of other people because it was so hard to get it.
It's more casual now.
yeah.
Now it's more casual.
Yeah.
So that's like the essence of desensitization, right?
Mm-hmm. Can't remember how we got onto this, but yeah.
But it's terrible, and we don't care.
So, final thoughts on the issue of democracy and electoral reform. Luke, haven't heard much from you today, so let's start with you.
Oh, let's start with me, eh? What was that question?
Final thoughts on democracy, electoral reform, etc.
It's all just going to lead to a tyranny.
Oh yeah, you think we're gonna
Well,
get
sure.
in Canada?
Everywhere.
Canadian
Everywhere,
tyrant. That'd be something.
I saw this great meme.
No, I don't know.
I saw this great meme of the CN Tower, the top of the CN Tower, like being half buried in a beach, basically replacing the image of the Statue of Liberty from
Planet of the
Planet
Apes.
of the Apes.
You maniacs! You blew it up!
You maniacs!
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it'd be great to see some reform, but I mean, all round. Like, if we want to see some change, let's get the kids voting and stuff like that. I don't know.
I think that's an important point. Like getting the youth vote galvanized and out there. Like their vote fucking matters, right?
I saw an experiment, and
Yeah,
they had kids vote in the classroom, and unanimously NDP won. In their vote,
Yeah,
kind of
that's
thing,
right. They did a parallel election with students.
Yeah.
I heard that.
That's telling.
Yeah.
Like
Well, what's also telling is that this was the first election that the millennials outnumbered any other
The baby boomers, yeah.
any other demographic,
Right.
or any other generation.
and what did some of them do with it? They declined their ballot.
Yeah.
Or they spoiled their ballot because fuck the system. I don't like any of these people. I'm not going to vote. I'm going to spoil it. Going to decline it. Whatever.
Or they didn't feel like
Or didn't bother.
bussing out to their polling.
It's all very
locations.
slow. If there's any sort of change going on, it's
Just a
very,
second,
very,
hold
very
on.
slow.
I did say some millennials. I do not want to cast a wide net over the entire
Right.
generation. Because, again, like I said before, there are some of that particular generation, myself included. I think I'm on the cusp of millennial
I feel
whatever.
like we're romper
But-
room. I see you, Samantha, Deborah, Timmy. I see you too. You put in some good effort there.
But there are a lot
Thank
of
you.
people of that generation who are very, very politically inclined.
Yeah.
you know. And it's up to them to get the vote out because their vote matters. The older generation, sadly or not so sadly, is dying, and their vote is going to mean less and less. Like I'm not disparaging senior citizens and anything. That's not at all what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yep. What I'm saying is that the next generation
Ages.
is inheriting this province and this country and this democracy, and it's up to them to vote for who they want to lead them.
That's why I think it's really concerning the trend in younger students who are just learning about civics only once they get into university or whatever, who are being fooled into rejecting any type of sort of older ideal of the Enlightenment, right? And ideas about society and civilizational stability, or about justice that I think had a stabilizing effect that were imperfect, and the rejection of which just leads to results that are even worse than what they think they're criticizing. I don't know. I don't know if I'm expressing myself well there.
Do you want to make that your
Sure, that's my final thought. Yeah.
Alrighty. As for myself, I think we need some type of reform. If we were to move to a new type of system, I would be inclined to support something like they have in Germany or like they have in France, or any type of system that's more representative of the will of the people than the first past the post system that we have in place right now. Anything that's I guess more democratic, for lack of a better term, would be, a better system than what we have going. And also, we're facing a federal election next year. So get out there, vote, make your voice heard, because that actually matters. There's some ridings in this election that won by just a handful of votes, or lost, depending on how you look at it.
Ruined by kids with
my riding
fake parties.
My riding was lost was lost to the Conservatives, who got about 175 votes more than the NDP.
That's
175. That's out of 50,000. A little bit more than 50,000 voters in my riding.
So for anyone who thinks that their vote doesn't count, sorry, it does. It counts.
Keyword. Sorry.
It counts.
Sorry, not sorry.
It counts for a lot. So get out there and vote.
Vote
Next time.
Yeah.
Because it's too late.
This has been Critical Junction, episode 41. I'm Mark.
I'm still Luke.
I'm Luke.
As always, thanks for listening, and until next time, keep thinking critically.